You're listening to the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. Today we are thrilled to have my good friend, the incredibly talented, funny, humble, multi-dimensional writer, producer, actor, theater impresario, Michael Imperioli. Best known for his role as Christopher in The Sopranos, for which he won an Emmy for Best Supporting Actor. Also penned a few episodes of The Sopranos. He's appeared in numerous TV shows, including Law and Order, NYPD Blues, Mad Dogs, Alex Inc., Escape at Dannemora, or one of my favorite roles, the part he played in Californication. He's appeared in numerous films by Spike Lee, for which he co-wrote and co-produced Summer of Sam, based on Son of Sam. He was in Jungle Fever, Girl 6, Malcolm X, Clockers. He's worked with Abel Ferrara on films like The Addiction, movies by Walter Hill, Peter Jackson, the Hughes Brothers, and of course, his small but hilarious role in Goodfellas, Martin Scorsese's film. Michael has long been active in the New York theater scene. He was co-founder of Machine Fall, where he wrote and produced and starred in many plays, and now he's an author. His new book is The Perfume Burned His Eyes, which he'll be doing a little reading from. We're very happy to have you, Michael Imperioli.
I'm not talking about love. My love is rotten to the core. You're listening to the Lydia and Spin with Lydia Lunch, and I'm talking to Michael Imperioli. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Lydia. It's a pleasure.
Director, writer, author, actor, theater producer. So we both wear a lot of different hats. Okay, but take me back to the beginning for a minute. You're a young kid. You're in New York. You know you got to do something. Did you know you had to act?
Yeah, I wanted to go into theater or film or something.
Like when? Age 12?
No, toward the last 2 years of high school,
Okay.
I started reading a lot of plays in
Okay.
my school library.
Like who?
Tennessee Williams,
God.
Arthur Miller. Tennessee Williams was my
Absolutely my
big one.
favorite. Yeah.
And I was going to go to college, and then I was going to go to Albany State University in New York at Albany, and I went up for the orientation in the summer, and I realized I really don't want to be but I was kind of like, well, I'm enrolled, I got to go. And then the last night, it was September, everything's packed. My parents are going to drive me
Right.
up to Albany the next day. I remember they gave me some money to open up a checking account, and I just said, I don't want to go.
yes.
They're like, really?
Oh, man.
I'm like, no, I don't want to go.
Can't
They
do
go,
it.
well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to go to acting school in New York. I want to go to...
Like, couldn't you have decided that a couple of months ago,
I
kid?
should have.
Really?
But
But
it was one of those things where I thought I couldn't do that. The lesson for me was freedom. All of a sudden something dawned on me and said, oh, wait, I have the freedom to do what I want to do. I don't have to go to college because I have to go to college.
Also,
or that.
instinct.
Instinct, trusting your gut.
You have to trust
Right.
the instinct. If you don't, you will fail every time. You have to go with you have to go with your instinct. So, all right, you decide that, you unpack
So
your
I
bags.
decide
Now-
that, and
now
then I
what?
say they're like, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to go to the Lee Strasberg, the actor studio.
Unbelievable.
I didn't
Of course.
realize the Actor Studio and Lee Strasberg Institute were two different things, but that didn't really matter. So they said, okay, well, it's your life. You want to do that, you can do that, but maybe go to college next year in January or something. I'm like, okay. So I go to the city, and I go to NYU. I went to Fordham Lincoln Center. I went to NYU and got brochures, and then I was walking. I didn't know where the Actor Studio or
Right.
Lee Strasberg
Yeah.
was. I
just knew they were
maybe
there.
I'll enroll in theater department at NYU. So I go to NYU. I get the brochures, and I just start walking back to the train through the village. I had never really been alone in the city before. I always, because I didn't live in the city.
You had come from
At that point, I was living about an hour north.
Right.
I went to high school north of the city. I grew up in Mount Vernon, right
Right.
near the city, but I went to high school
yeah.
up
So
there.
now you're first day
So,
wandering the village.
And I start walking up towards Grand Central, but on my way to Grand Central through the Village, cross 14th Street, and I see a street called Irving Place, which I've never heard of. And I'm like, I walk up, and all of a sudden I see this big giant flag. And it says Lee Strasberg Theater Institute. I swear to God.
Well,
I didn't know where the fuck I was going.
Trust your feet in this instance.
And I see it, and I walk in, and I say, I want to come here. And they said, well, come next week for an interview.
Wow.
And that's how I started.
And what year was that?
1983.
And you were in your
17. And I met John Ventimiglia, who played Artie Bucco on The Sopranos.
Right.
And we became friends. And I knew when I met him, I said, I'm going to do stuff with this
Amazing.
guy. I said, I know we're going to do stuff.
Even if it takes 20 years.
So from that, there were a few colleagues that I met then. And one guy started writing. I started producing theater not long after that. Then I started directing theater. At the same time, 3 of us started playing music together. You know, people always think, oh, you're an actor, now you're branching out into this and that. It's like, it wasn't like that.
You were
we
always
came from a world where a lot of people
and
did that.
And that's what it
there
was in that period, yeah.
Discipline.
Especially in New York in that period, from the late 70s to the late 80s, people were doing, I mean, if the art is burning in your blood,
right.
not necessarily is only one way, the way to get it out. I mean, people did music, they made films, they did paintings,
it was a very fertile time that way, and the people that I gravitated to all were of that like mind. So
what
that's
music
how I
was influenced? So you said that Tennessee Williams was a big influence, and I mean we've talked about some Tennessee Williams films and unbelievable. In fact, One Arm I'm thinking of suddenly.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Boxer, but what music was affecting you at that time? So you're 17, you want to act, you walk into Lee Strasberg, you also want to do music. You start doing music.
At that time, it really was kind of. Early REM records, like my favorite one was Reckoning. That was my favorite record of theirs. Echo and the Bunnymen were a big one. The Smiths
Now you're
were
really
huge.
pulling your pants down here, aren't you?
The Smiths were huge for me. That was life-changing.
Why so?
They were very original,
okay.
and I had never heard anything quite like that, you know. I was totally unaware of punk then.
Yeah.
I was very much like a kind of a nerd.
Kind of a nerd.
Yeah, I didn't know anything.
Look how fucking cool
I didn't know anything about anything.
See the transformation?
No, I really didn't. I mean, I was open to stuff, but I wasn't where I was living. I wasn't.
Yeah. Okay.
We weren't exposed to anything. You know, there was one girl who had a Lou Reed T-shirt in my high school, and I didn't know who that was. I'm like, "Who's that?" And she was like, "It's Lou Reed."
Right,
I'm like, "Who's that?" Well, you know, Walk on the Wild Side. I was like, "I think so."
So, all right, you were a bit of a nerd. Go to Lee Strasberg. They took you in, I guess.
They took me in. I studied there for 2 years, and then a teacher left and opened her own studio, and I stayed with her for like 4 years.
Fantastic. But you just mentioned Lou Reed. I don't want to jump back and forth too much, because what was your first professional acting gig before we get on to the Lou Reed connection?
I did an off-Broadway play that I got cast as the lead, and I was fired after opening night.
Wow, you were that good.
I
were too good for the stage.
I didn't know how to. I had been in acting class, and I didn't know how to take direction. And I didn't like the director, and I didn't respect him, and I didn't think he knew what he was doing.
And
I wouldn't listen to him.
And sometimes they don't, but sometimes
no,
they
and
do.
he really didn't. He wasn't very good. He was a TV director who was trying to do theater, and he didn't know what he was doing. But if when I was older, I would have known a way to give him what he needed and do my thing, which I didn't know then.
Who do you think was the best director as far as giving you the inspiration or the insight?
Martin Scorsese.
There you go.
Without a doubt.
I mean, I'm just going to say, I've worked with photographers and so-called filmmakers, and even with photographers, I'm like, will you please give some direction? Like, do people... Either it's these people that think you know what I would love someone to give me direction in anything. So tell me about your experience with Scorsese.
He
How
gave
did
direction
that come
about? When they were casting that movie, I had just started working with an agent, Goodfellas. That was 1989. They were casting it and shot it in 89.
You were still a very young man.
I was 23.
Still are a young man.
So the agent sent me in. I met the casting woman, and I knew what I did know is that Martin Scorsese liked improvisation, and I knew that just from research. So I met the casting woman. I did a lot of improvisation. I read the book that he was shooting. He was doing an adaptation of the book, and she said, "Oh, come back and meet Marty." You know, now For me,
The
that's
moment
like,
you've
yeah.
been waiting
So I'm
for.
going to meet Martin Scorsese.
This is it.
For a
I mean, 'cause
kid,
really,
Italian kid
that
from New
is
York
it.
who wants to be an actor.
That is it.
That's like
No,
the
there's
Yankees
there's
calling you to.
There's nothing bigger. There's nothing bigger.
There's nothing bigger.
There's
So
nothing
I went
bigger.
in and read for him, and he was really nice and really liked it, I guess.
There you go.
Was really sweet. And Goodfellas was the fourth movie I was in. The
Okay.
very first one I was in was a movie called Lean on Me with Morgan Freeman, directed by John Avildsen, who did Rocky.
Okay.
And he was not very nice. He was overwhelmed. There were too many kids, high school kids in the movie, and he didn't have a lot of patience and made me feel horrible. Marty was complete opposite.
Right.
The day I get to the set, he said, if anything you need to ask, or you come to me,
that's the way it
knock
should
on the
be.
door,
Exactly.
don't feel intimidated. He treated me like I belonged there, like I was an actor.
And amazing. And like, they know what they want.
Yeah.
Tell me how I can give it to you.
And he treated me absolutely no different than the other actors on the set. So
Thank you very much.
I'll always
Because
be
I mean,
indebted.
that was the breeding ground for you in
Yeah.
a sense. I mean, and that
That gave me a
basically
career,
put you on the map.
basically. So what he did was,
Did his sense of direction like improve? Okay, because you've worn, you've done the music, you've done production, you've done directing, you've done writing. Did it make you as a person choose to deal with people in a
Yes.
better way as well?
100%.
You see this god of cinema who's being this generous. And, yeah, and
100%.
it does. Yes, exactly.
well, what a good director does, besides giving direction, even before that,
Thank you.
what he does is creates an atmosphere where you feel open to be creative.
Especially if they want you to improv.
Right. Because if, as an actor, you're very vulnerable when you're acting. You're performing and you're in front of a camera, you're in front of an audience,
Because
and
are
there's
you
people
nailing
there.
it or are you a fucking idiot? I mean,
Yeah.
the question comes up.
So
right? I mean, are you-
yes. So if there's tension, you tend to close up and you don't take chances, and you'll do the absolute minimum, or you'll
But when
be
they
safe.
allow you to not have fear and they encourage,
Right.
which is look, that's about any kind of collaboration.
Right.
And I think that when I'm collaborating with musicians, for instance, the scene I try to set up is a very safe place. Like, there is no mistakes.
How do you
Nothing
do
is
that?
Wrong. First of all, I have a concept. That comes first, and then I choose the musicians. So already they know they were chosen specifically for this. And I'm just very encouraging. And I'm like, and look, especially with rock music, there are no mistakes. Don't worry about it. It's rock music. So I'm very encouraging that way because I want people to have a safe space in which to go beyond what they would have, which is like musical improv, which is like the same thing. So I try to be as encouraging as possible, and that's why I've been able to work with so many people, and sometimes the same people, after 20 years again. It's so important to make people feel comfortable when you're creating with them.
Yeah. And have you had experiences where it didn't happen, where it just didn't work?
No, I can only go one or two experiences where it's not that it didn't work, it's that it was about something else.
Right.
Because I've worked with so many different people and so many different kinds of people. The project always worked.
Right.
There might have been two guys that were macho exhibitionists, but they were really insecure girls underneath it, and there might have been friction, but it wasn't in the art.
Right.
So that was just a different thing.
Right.
And I've worked with a lot of really sensitive people, really outsider artists, and fey boys, and aggressive women, but you allow people to do what they do best by opening up the space where they feel safe.
That's exactly it. Because when you feel safe, like I said,
You take chances.
So what he did? I mean, I'm actually kind of, when I really look back on it, I'm shocked I was so gutsy and ballsy. Because what I did was, I said to the props guy, knowing now how films work, it's it's very kind of extreme. And I said to the props guy, I said, listen, I want to reset the card table, and all the props between the scenes. And Marty said, yeah, that's good. Let him do that. And the props guy, I go, okay. And then the bar where I had to make the drinks was facing away from the camera, away from the table. So I said, let's put the bar so I can watch them, because I need to watch them all the time.
Good.
And Marty said, yes, that's a good idea. Turn the bar around.
And I mean, there you are, you're directing because
and he's letting me do this.
And hello, and there you go, encouraged for the future.
And sure enough, in the movie, there's actually a shot where I'm making a drink,
Right.
and the camera is on me, watching them.
As it should be.
So he allowed all this, and then he said to me, just treat the actors like the characters on and off camera.
Right. Okay, so
which
stay in
is very
character.
liberating, so it's not like I'm this young actor saying,
Yeah, no,
what can I do to be a big movie star,
No.
Mr. De Niro?
You're
Or
in
what was it
character.
like being Travis Bickle? None of that. So first we spend the whole morning rehearsal. So the rehearsal starts, De Niro walks in, which is a huge moment.
Of course.
You know, I'm in the same
Come on.
set, De Niro.
You're
and he
breathing
sits
in
down,
De Niro.
and I go up to De Niro and I say, Jimmy, what are you drinking? And he looked
That's
up at
amazing.
me.
You bluff. You
And
put.
I don't even know if he knew who
Yeah.
I was, and he looked at me and he went, like,
And you are
a
making
triple
the
take.
you are making the De Niro face.
and then
right
he
now.
went, give me a shot of scotch and a
Nice.
glass of water. And I was like, all right.
All right.
And
You got
and then
it.
I brought him a fake shot of scotch
Fake
and a glass
scotch.
of water.
There you go.
So, you know, and then
And do you find it very liberating? Well, of course, if you're around the cast members, you're the newbie. To stay in character, then it must
very
be more
liberating
comfortable.
because all I had to
More
do was be.
comfortable.
That's what I focused
Be
on
who
the
you are.
props.
Be who you're supposed to be.
Focusing on the drinks. Do they
Focus,
need a
yeah.
drink? Is the ashtray dirty?
You're taking
Resetting
care of
it.
right, exactly.
And that's what he wants, because he wants authenticity and he wants something real to happen. And pretty much all the dialogue in I was in 2 scenes in that movie. All that dialogue.
And they were really what put you on the map.
It was
those two.
all improvisation,
Yeah.
except for one line that was in the script, which is "Go fuck yourself, Tommy." Everything
I mean,
else was
how
improv.
hard would that have been to say anyway? So what did that lead to? What was the next thing that was really? What did that lead? So
Well,
there
what
you are.
happened
I mean,
was
the film
after
was
that,
amazing.
the
I mean, the whole
film-
film is just incredible.
Right before the film,
And Debbie Mazar
Debbie
is
Mazar's
amazing.
in
I mean, everybody in it,
Lorraine
but
and,
everybody in it.
Yeah,
Right.
half
Yeah,
of the
I mean,
half of the
incredible.
cast of The
You know,
Sopranos.
and you know, I have to say, the line, I'm making the meatballs. When I'm going on
Who
tour.
says that?
I think it's Ray Liotta when
Oh,
the
right,
the
yeah.
helicopters. It's at the end.
Oh,
going
right,
crazy.
when he's all
It's going crazy,
insane.
he's paranoid, and he goes, "I gotta make the meatballs." Whenever I'm going on tour, and I'm like, you know, scattering getting my things together. My one girlfriend, I'm always like, "I'm making the meatballs. Don't bother me," and she knows what I mean. It's like I got to get ready
To go.
right, and instead I'm not running from
A
the
lot of
law.
details.
I'm running to my show, making the meatballs. Stir the meatballs. So okay, so after that, then
So what happened was
comes,
that
what comes to you?
that movie, right before it was released, they started having like private screenings.
Yeah.
So Spike Lee was loved Marty, and
Right.
they became friends. So Marty invited Spike Lee to a screening,
There we go. Yep.
and at the very same time, Spike was casting Jungle Fever. So several actors from Goodfellas got cast in Jungle Fever, and Spike was very similar to Marty.
Right.
Wants a lot of input, wants collaboration, wants improvisation.
He seems like he would be very welcoming.
Very welcoming.
I mean,
encourages it and wants
yeah.
it. And we had a really good time. And he said, "We're going to work together again."
And
One of the very few people who actually said that and made good on it.
Thank you very much.
And
And
I
so
wound up doing.
right. So
I've done 6 projects with him.
exactly. And then what about Summer of Sam?
So I had been with Spike for a number of years, and then a friend of mine had the idea for this movie about this punk rock guy who gets beat up by his friends who think he's, guys he grew up with who think he's the killer. Well, my friend tells me this idea, and he said he's writing a script on this. That happened to my cousin. My cousin wasn't a punk, but up in Mount Vernon, some guys that he knew that he grew up on, for some reason, thought, based on like the description, and the cops were saying shit like,
Oh, they thought
he's
he
a
was
loner.
The killer. They thought he was the killer.
Yeah, the cops
Oh,
are
your cousin
giving
was the
shit on
killer.
TV saying, look, it's probably someone who lives in the area in
Oh, well, not
Yonkers.
an hour
This
away,
is in
but-
Mount
yeah,
Vernon.
yeah,
He
come
said,
on.
he lives among you. Maybe
How
he's
many
weird.
loners? I mean, how many weirdo loners?
Well,
Come
you
on.
start looking in your neighborhood. It's like, well,
yeah.
that guy's gay.
Yeah,
that
well,
guy's
okay.
divorced and lives
yeah.
alone. That guy is out all
Yeah.
night. This, that guy's got weird eyes.
Right.
And
FBI
they started
profiling.
doing that. So
There
I
we go.
said, so we had this in common, and we started writing
You
together.
had that in common, yeah. Your cousin and
his friend.
And his friend.
He lived in the Bronx. I lived in Mount Vernon. That happened a couple of places.
Everybody was under suspicion. I was
Yeah.
in New York the Summer of Sam. I was here.
Yeah.
And that did parallel in my life being in Rochester, New York, when Kenneth Bianchi, before he was the Hillside Strangler, was doing a series of murders when I'm 11 years old.
Where was he? In
Rochester.
Rochester?
So he wasn't busted till after they busted him for the Hillside Strangling. but he had killed about 5 or 6 girls.
In Rochester?
In Rochester, and on the nightly news there, they'd be on a map. The last one ran for like a mile naked down the highway. Nobody stopped.
The
And
woman
I-
was running? A victim?
No, 11-year-old girls. These were young girls. And this was on the nightly news, and this pretty much put the serial killing gene in my head, which
Right.
made me think, come on, motherfucker, really? I get in that car, I'm going to be the one that gets out alive. Okay? But it then paralleled the Son of Sam, so then...
Yeah, and
and
I
then,
was
and then,
11.
Of course, and then I
that
was in LA
year.
during the Hillside Strangler, so there's parallel. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So I remember it
of
clearly,
course.
and
You
I remember
remember
the
the Son of
paranoia
Sam.
because we lived, my family
Everybody
lived
under
in
suspicion.
Mount Vernon and the Bronx, and that's where he was, he lived in Yonkers. That's where they caught him. So we started writing that, and originally the plan was I wanted to direct it. So
Yeah.
I brought it to Spike, and he said, you should direct this, and I'll executive produce it. And we couldn't get anywhere with
Right,
it that way.
okay.
I was...
Because who are you to direct?
Who was
at
I
that
to
point?
direct? We were trying to attach some actors. We kind of did attach some actors.
And John Leguizamo, right?
Christopher
Is John
Walken.
Leguizamo?
John wasn't attached at that time.
But I mean,
Chris
is
Walken
amazing.
was attached, but he didn't wind up doing it.
John Leguizamo's stand-up,
Fantastic.
amazing.
Fantastic.
Love his performances.
So then we couldn't get it, and then it was kind of dead in the water.
Yeah.
And then Spike said, "You know what?
Maybe he should
I
wear the
want to direct
director's
this."
hat.
And I said,
How do you feel
Fantastic.
about the film? How do you feel about the way the film came out?
"Oh, I love it. I went to see it. The Metrograph did a screening of
Right.
it in December. I hadn't seen it in many years, and it was really a thrill. There's so much
Yeah, there's so
life
much,
on it.
and there's so much about the time period.
the
there. They really
time,
captures the time
and
period.
it's just a very alive
Yeah,
movie.
it is.
The difference, my point of view, and the difference between me and Victor, who were the writers, and Spike,
Yeah.
we had we got behind this theory that he was not a lone killer, that he was part of a cult.
okay.
That was there's a book that's written about it that's very
Okay.
detailed and interesting, that he was part of a satanic cult.
Certainly possible.
And
Or copycats
he,
as well. I
he
mean,
took the rap because they were
Right.
threatening his parents, whatever.
and he was a bit cuckoo.
And a lot of other people did not believe that. The cops didn't want anyone to think that because they were just trying to
okay,
end everything.
They don't want to look for anybody else.
So Spike's take was that a little bit different,
Yeah.
just about that aspect. But I love the movie. I'm very, very proud of it.
All right, so
It means a lot,
you're
that
doing the
movie.
movies, you're writing the movies, you're acting in the movies, you're doing music at the same time, and now I'm drum cutting because your credits could take all night, and I'd love to be here with you, and I am going to be here with you all night. But now you have the Perfume Burned His Eyes, a book, and you mentioned Lou Reed earlier, and it's basically just break it down for me. Tell me exactly what it is.
It's a coming-of-age story novel set beginning in 1976 in New York, and it's about a teenage boy who lives in Jackson Heights, a very middle-class, working-class life, and his father and his grandfather both die in this short period of time. And he's an only child, and it turns out his grandfather had some money stashed, and the mother gets the money, and they move. The mother just wants to start over, so they move to Manhattan. They move to East 52nd Street and near like First Avenue. And they move to kind of a posh, 2-bedroom apartment in a posh building. And turns out, and then the kid gets a job in a diner. He gets enrolled in a
Delivery
private school.
boy,
He
yeah.
falls in love and begins, this new life there. But living above him in the same building is Lou Reed, who actually did live in that neighborhood in the mid-'70s with his transgender girlfriend
Sylvia.
Rachel,
Or racial at the time,
who
right?
was his girlfriend, and he's in a particularly crazy, shooting speed and for days, but very creative and fertile period of his life. And the kid winds up becoming kind of a gopher, and Lou becomes this quasi-unorthodox, strange father figure to the kid.
In the worst way possible.
That's the story,
In the
really.
worst way possible.
And then the kid's navigating all the kind of totems of manhood and adulthood.
What was interesting to me in reading the book is it was very sweet and sensitive. It was also perverse. It seemed, when I read it, I asked you, is it a true story? And you said it could be true, which I loved. But really what was impressive is it's very difficult to as an adult man that's gone through writing The Summer of Sam, etc., and living your life, to go back and actually capture the mindset of a lonely 16, 17-year-old boy who's doing this. And then to me also what was the most surprising thing is the last chapter is just so poetic and so beautiful, which is basically like a eulogy to Lou Reed, who's already passed at this point. So
yeah, the last chapter jumps to 3 days after Lou's death, and the boy is now a man. None of the events are true outside of the biographical background stuff of Lou's, like he lived here and he was with this person. None of the events are true. I always say emotionally it's true.
Well, and it's unexpected, which was what I appreciated about it. Is it's very unexpected. Why don't you read us a little bit right now? Now that we're
could
talking
do
about
that.
it.
I heard the music before I got to his door. It was open just a sliver, so I pushed it a little wider. He was on the rug playing an acoustic guitar. I had never seen him with anything but an electric. He played a very simple riff over and over again, 2 chords. It was hypnotic, concentrated, and sad. And so was he. He didn't notice me for about 30 seconds because his head was bent and cocked at an odd angle down toward the gaping orifice of his instrument. There was a photograph and a red tank top at his feet. He may have been staring at either one of them, or both. A bottle of Johnny Walker Black sat a little to his right. He looked up and saw me in the doorway. He didn't stop what he was doing, but gave enough of a nod to say I was welcome to come in. I didn't want to interrupt him, but I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay inside of that moment with him, inside the quiet. It felt right. It almost felt good. I sat on the floor across from him. I didn't feel like a guest. I belonged there. It was mine as much as his that day. I'm composing a symphony, Tim. It's something I think I will be very proud of. He kept on strumming the 2 chords of his song. It was sparse, stark, and bare, but I'm sure he was hearing much, much more than what was coming out of his guitar. It is a symphonic suite. It's very formal and structured with scrupulous discipline. I am putting everything I have into this one, everything I have and everything I can get. The New York Philharmonic Strings, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. No, fuck the Mormons. I'd rather the Vienna Boys. He glanced at me. And I want the middle part to sound like the last day of heaven. Celestial voices, violins and cellos. I love cellos. The cello is the musical instrument that resembles the human voice more than any other. He stared at the photo. As my eyes got used to the room's dim light, I could see it was a picture of him and Rachel. He was sitting on her lap, and her arms are wrapped around him in a very protective way. She was wearing the same red tank top that was on the floor in front of him. Tim, me boy, this will be the first rock song to change water into wine, feed the multitudes, and raise the dead from their tombs. That last statement made him chuckle. And as the middle part hits its coda, God reaches down with his purple and his finger, and he grabs at him right by the apple. And then the words start coming, and now I'm the coldest motherfucker ever walked a block in Harlem mid-December. Bobby Sledge, a.k.a. Bobby Rikers, carried a straight razor in his boot. Every time he went to the toilet, he dipped the blade into the bowl before he flushed whatever it was that came out of him. So the blade was constantly contaminated with all kinds of breeding bacteria, amoebas, parasites, and boogeymen. Woe unto she who got a bit of Bobby's blade. Lou stopped playing the guitar, took a big swig of scotch, and lit a cigarette. He coughed 5 or 6 times after the first long drag and hacked up something nasty into a tissue. Then he stuck the smoking ciggy back into his mouth and resumed his riff. Oh, I mean, what I've learned really after writing the book is that you can't take any detail for granted when it comes, right? If something comes to you because now you're attuned to the story and the characters, nothing is random, right? Because it's like you're tuned to this world that you're creating. So if a thought comes, pay attention to it. If a random thing, a song comes to mind, a color, an image, pay attention to it, because nothing's random when you're, when you're, and I'm sure the same thing goes for writing music as well.
Well, I mean, and let's talk about Bach for a second, if you let me go there, because what's your attraction to Bach? I mean, the foundation of Western tonal music is Bach, and you actually claim to love this. I mean, is this
Oh, I think it's a real.
right?
What's the word? It's just a real authentic expression of a spiritual experience.
Yeah, I mean, and he thought he was speaking through God, even though he was, in a weird way, less progressive, more pragmatic, dealt with well-tempered instruments to basically, when I talk to my folks about atonality, because I'm into the avant-garde and all that stuff, they're like, well, what about a song? What about melody? It's like, well, what is melody to you? Like you don't understand. Like, this is not forever. Pre-tonality was way out there. Renaissance music, medieval music it wasn't modern 12-tone music, but how the fuck did this fucking guy who thought he was translating God had 36 kids? I think he
had a lot of kids.
It was something.
And wasn't he? What didn't he repair like organs? Wasn't he like in
he might have. I wouldn't know.
That?
I mean, the fun fact for me for Bach is that we have about a quarter of his music because paper is so valuable. Most of it's like wrapped in fish at markets and all that stuff. I mean, it's like.
Have you ever seen Pasolini's Gospel According to Matthew?
I didn't see that one.
It's mostly Bach. And
amazing.
He shot the movie in Calabria, south of Italy, with all like Italian Calabrians.
Interesting.
But it's
not very Bach down there.
And it's not. It's not Palestine. He's setting. He's telling the story of Christ, the passion of the Christ.
Yep.
And he uses Bach, and it's black and white, and it just works.
Michael, what are some of your favorite films?
That's one of them.
Yeah,
Pasolini,
of course.
Mamma Roma and Acatone, and Gospel According to Matthew. Right. Those three are magnificent. My favorite director is John Cassavetes.
Oh, I absolutely love John Cassavetes. I loved him as an actor as well.
Great actor, and just a great
the Chinese Bookie.
One of my favorites. Yeah,
absolutely.
Opening Night and Woman Under the Influence.
Absolutely. And
I also like Fassbinder a lot. One of my
What a great
favorites.
face and what a great actor. What a great director. What a great
and a great
mind.
writer.
Absolutely.
A great mind, a great filmmaker.
I mean, that period of films. One of my favorite films from that period, I don't know if you've ever seen this, Rip Torn, Coming Apart.
Is that when he beats up Norman Mailer?
No,
is that
nobody's
scene
ever
in the
seen
movie?
it. He's a psychologist. All of his patients are women. His wife is in Long Island. He doesn't want to go there. Sally Kirkland is one of his patients. He's screwing them all. The setting is a New York apartment, all windows on one side, all mirrors on the other. I don't know why nobody's ever seen this.
Who directed it?
A guy directed one film or two. I don't even remember the director. But Rip Torn at that period, unbelievable. And it kind of predates the films we were talking about earlier.
Right.
Like Hi Mom. I think it might have been 1967. And, I love Rip Torn. Rip Torn. He was, A, the name, B, the actor.
Yeah, and his wife was Geraldine Page.
Unbelievable.
Torn and Page, which is
exact Torn and Page.
Roar.
Well, some of my favorite films though are Tennessee Williams.
I just saw Streetcar again.
You cannot see it. You cannot see it.
Man, is that?
Well, Tennessee Williams, and
the writing just is crazy.
Well,
the fact that he would be able to put those words in characters like working class characters' mouth, and they work.
Vivian Leigh,
incredible.
Unbelievable. One of my favorite films is Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which I suggested to you.
That's a good
We
one.
do a re-up of. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton in that period.
Yeah, that's pretty fabulous.
This is one of the best, and that was.
I love Burton.
No, but who wrote the screenplay of this?
That was Edward Albee.
Edward Albee.
Mike Nichols directed.
Edward Albee, who, by the way, actually broke theater by writing strong female characters, because before that it was all tyrannical men. And Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf came from an Edward Albee play. There is no better film about the disintegration and insanity of an alcoholic relationship ever.
That's
then there's Tennessee Williams. Suddenly Last Summer.
Yeah.
Also, is that Tennessee Williams? I think it is.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Well, I'm just talking Elizabeth Taylor now for a minute. Suddenly Last Summer, Butterfield 8. They don't make them like that anymore. However,
Can I make?
One second. However, between you and me, we might be able to do something kind of similar. Somewhere between Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Suddenly Last Summer, and Straight Jacket. Michael, I'm just proposing.
Straight Jacket.
It's Joan Crawford, by the way.
So
I've never seen that.
I want to break the thread here, and I want to connect the thread. both of you like to cook. And Lydia, she wrote a cookbook. You were on a cooking.
You wrote a cookbook?
Oh, yes.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes.
What's it called?
The Need to Feed. And you know what?
The
They
Need to
pulped. They pulped the copies.
Mm.
I now own it.
What does that mean? They pulped
No,
the copy.
so they had 1,000 copies left.
All right.
They pulped them. They shredded them.
Oh, my God.
Didn't even sell them back to me. It's called The Need to Feed. It's very sexy. It's beautiful. Blah, blah. It has musical suggestions and a lot of arcane details. Whatever. You can still get it on Amazon. Go ahead.
But you
Tim's also a great
you
cook.
won a.
I want a cooking
You won a cooking
TV
contest on
show.
TV.
For charity, yeah.
Exactly. But you're a
He's
vegetarian,
Italian.
right?
Vegetarian,
You're
yeah.
vegetarian, but I mean, there's no better place to be a vegetarian than Italy, if you ask me.
Best.
I mean, maybe other Mediterranean places like
very easy place to be.
Greece.
There you go.
Greece wouldn't be bad.
I mean, for me, when I'm touring with vegetarians or even vegans, and I go into Europe and you go to Northern Europe, they're dying.
Yeah.
They're actually starving to death. They're compensating through beer, and it starts getting ridiculous. But that's a side point.
Point is,
you love to cook. You
Yeah.
absolutely love to cook.
I do love to cook.
Tim loves to cook. I love to cook
too.
Tim's a great griller.
I mean, I would think for artists that love to cook, and this is the connection I want to make, is that it's endless what we do. There's no, unlike a regular job, like a beginning and to an end, it's endless what we do. It's like we do things, and it's ever moving. It doesn't end. But the satisfaction of a hard duration of the cooking experience, of like you start and there's an ending. And there is a satisfaction point upon arrival when you finish cooking.
Let me put it more astutely and quickly.
Yes. That's
Let me
I
put
get
it more
exactly what you're
concisely.
saying.
Let me just apply this more concisely. When you are an artist, everything you do is art. The way you live your life is art. The way you cook a meal is art. Because you are an artist. Your greatest creation is really yourself. Art is a salve to the pain that we're all in, or so we hope it to be. Trauma is as old as the cave. Okay? So, any of our individual unique traumas, and this is what gave me the strength to do what I do from a very early age. I knew my trauma was not unique. I knew it did not start in my family. I knew it goes back farther than I can even imagine. So art becomes the salve to that universal pain that we all feel. And that's why we do what we do. Because if we did not do, and by the way, if you were not burning in your blood, do not create. Stay in your garage, write your poetry, keep it under your bed. If it burns your blood, which means your blood is corrosive, which means your blood has been polluted by thousands of lifetimes of war, massacre, death, resurrection, love, hate, birth, all of it. When your blood burns and is corrosive, you must create, which is why I create at the rate that I do, which is why Tim Dahl creates, which is why Michael Imperioli creates. Because if we did not, it would be a very ugly picture. So instead, it's not like we're trying to paint a pretty picture on a piece of shit. It's that we're trying to express what we know. We are not the only ones who feel this. This is the Lydia and Spin with Tim Dahl and Michael Imperioli.